Hello, welcome to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. The build up to the next CJI has started, and we are firmly on the train that is heading towards this event that has been announced by Craig Jones, which seems to be CJI 2.5. So at the Jiu Jitsu Oracle, we're going to do our best to preview the event and build up the hype for what I think could be the biggest grappling event this year. I'm Ross, that's Calum. Calum, I did a quick solo pod following Craig's dripping of info onto social media where he was saying there's going to be another CJI. So what's your take on this event?
I've got some curiosities. One, why it's 2.5 and not just 3. Like, what does that entail for what 3 is going to be? Is he doing 2 in a year? I don't really know what the deal with that is. The second is like, I think everyone was curious before who the funder is, but like I'm extra curious now, and I've heard rumors that it might be Mark Zuckerberg because he's obviously the richest guy that does jiu-jitsu, and like someone that's just willing to throw 10 million at a jiu-jitsu competition like this. I think that's very plausible, but I'm quite curious about that. But I think that's the biggest headline, right? That it's 10 million prize pot.
10
So
million
yeah,
prize
that
pot and 8 grapplers, apparently, one night in July, free on YouTube. I think that's what we know so far. In terms of who the funders are, when CGI 2 was happening, and then there was the controversial ending where it looked like New Wave were going to be paid money, and then they weren't. Remember all that stuff happening? Seems so long ago now. Some detectives on Reddit were doing work on who the funder is and making guesses based on planes, I think, private planes that Craig had been on, etc. And I think they'd arrived at the conclusion that it wasn't Zuckerberg, but whoever it is, I'm glad they exist, because this is awesome that someone wants to just pump money into grappling. Let's get 8 guys together. And it's like, what you're expecting Craig to come back with? Oh, they'll do it for a $1 million prize pool. No, 10 million this time. Just ridiculous. But the ridiculousness adds to it. It's awesome.
yeah, interesting if it's like 10 million for the winner, or it's like I don't know, like 7 million for the winner, 2 million for second, 1 million for third. But if it's 10 million for the winner, I think there's a good chance that's their last ever match, unless they just like enjoy competing and do it for legacy. But like, I think for a lot of people, if they come away from a match with 10 million, that's potentially the last time we're going to see them compete.
Does Craig do it to win the 10 million?
Yeah, that would be a good move.
Does Gordon come out of retirement? So we put out, talking about what we hope the tournament will be, who will be involved, etc. We've started to put out suggestions on our Instagram and had some replies. And so I thought we'd do this episode based on what we would like to see and who we would like to see involved. And this being said, I've seen posts out there where people have gone in strong saying the tournament has to be this, or this is who has to be in. And I'm not going to say it like that, because it's Craig's creation, it's Craig's event, however Craig wants to do it, obviously entirely up to him. But I think as fans, it's cool to put out ideas and suggestions as to what we'd hope. And definitely the overwhelming preference for the event is that there is a tournament involving what I'll call middleweight. Somewhere round about 85 kilos being the weight that people are involved at. I think when it came to CGI 1, that was the weight class where there were the most exciting matches. And I think in terms of grapplers who are currently available that could put on an exciting event, that would be the weight class where they are, rather than a lighter weight, say 66, or a heavier weight, say over 99. And people weren't really keen for an open weight tournament So are you on board with this idea of let's put the cutoff at roundabout middleweight? And do you have a number of kilos that you would like to see this event take place at?
I would say 80 kilos again. I think that year with the guys that were in that under 80 kilo division, coupled with some of the guys that were in at 77, and then you can also pick a couple of guys that were at 66 for ADCC, like that is just insanely deep, and like who's got some of the best grapplers in the world that aren't facing each other at the moment for various reasons, exclusive contracts, etc., etc. So if we get 8 of the best guys from around that weight in, that would be good. I think if you were to increase it to 85, you know, you would start to get some pretty heavy guys that are gonna, because obviously like you will nearly kill yourself to make that weight if it's for 10 million. So you're going to get some massive guys cut into 85. If that is the case, and then that's going to heavily disadvantage a lot of the grapplers that I would like to see in it from the 66 and 77 kilo weight class ADCC wise. So I would say just under 80 kilos again.
80. On the money, I wonder if there are prizes for positioning, but also prizes for submissions, etc., to try and create excitement. I would like to see either a round robin tournament, like a kumite, or at least 2 groups of 4, where we get to see everyone involved multiple times per night, because the people we're going to suggest, I would like to see more than once. I wouldn't like anyone to lose and then be out.
Yeah, I agree. I'm for a grappling industries CGI merger round robin. Like we've said, like all these guys that we've said, oh, we want to see this guy face this guy, but like if it is single elimination, then half of those guys are going to be out first round, and then half of those guys are going to be out second round. So that would be a shame. I would like to see the round robin format, and then with that, it depends how Craig wants to spread the money, but like say he did like 5 million for the winner, then it's like each guy that won a match, could get like 100k or something. Then if you win by submission, 250k would be a really nice way to like spread the wealth a little bit. Because really, I think the difference between like a guy winning 5 million and 10 million is all obviously big, but it's not as big as if a bunch of guys got paid really well and that set them up for the future. So it'd be nice from the athlete's perspective to see that, and then it would encourage, a lot of good action in the matches, and we'd get to see lots of different matches as well.
And also, the prize pool's so big that I don't think guys would be adverse to competing more than once on the event.
Yeah. I think as well, like, I don't know what the deal will be with exclusive contracts for this, but I would imagine with Craig's personality, if it is the case that people can't compete because of exclusive contracts, he's trying to make it, a statement like it's a bad decision to do this because you're missing out on this kind of thing. So, if every grappler is making hundreds of thousands from this, it's a big middle finger to the whole exclusive contract thing, I think, which would be a Craig Jones kind of statement to make, I think.
I wonder, we don't know the ins and outs of people's contracts. One can only speculate at this stage. And I think through this process, we might start to learn a bit more about who's tied down or who's with a promotion where they might have a degree of exclusivity, but the promotion's still open to them doing other things. I think I've heard Tom DeBlas basically match makes the jiu-jitsu for One, I think I'm right in saying, and he seems quite open. Yeah, and I think he's quite open to guys as long as it's sensible, etc., taking matches with other promotions, whereas some promotions might like to have a tighter hold on athletes. I wonder, given Craig's, I think it's fair to say, negative views on UFC BJJ, or certainly the way UFC BJJ has conducted business thus far in terms of potentially tying up athletes. I wonder if even one of those athletes was to get the green light to compete in this, whether Craig would allow anyone from that promotion to take part, whether this is a thing whereby they're trying to create something different to really show that the UFC BJJ way of seemingly the way they do things is not what should be happening in this sport. So let's just take Andrew Tackett, for example. If he was either exclusive contract and he's out, well, he's out. Even if his contract possibly allowed him to do other things, would Craig take him in anyway? Or would he say, no, because you're competing there, I'm not going to have anyone who competes for that promotion on this? We're just suggesting ideas. I'm not aware of Craig speaking out on this yet, but it's just like the vibes that are happening. I could see this being set up to be very much not in cooperation with UFC BJJ, which is interesting in terms of like the wider sporting context. We're seeing the MMA event with Ronda Rousey against Gina Carano being very much set up against UFC, and the fact that Ronda Rousey appeared on the major pro wrestling rival to WWE, AEW, was seen as like a big middle finger to UFC / WWE / TKO, the umbrella body that runs that. And I like it that we've got some competition and athletes willing to go out and do different things. So if this is set up to be different to UFC BJJ, I think that's good. And also we saw the rivalry between ADCC and the first CJI resulting in a huge amount of interest and intrigue in the sport. So sometimes you need these promotional battles to happen to create more hype. So
yeah, I also like the fact that Craig's like in a position to use CGI as a weapon, but not in a selfish way, like for the good of the sport ultimately, because of what he was able to achieve with ADCC and the pay, and then like obviously the big thing just now is exclusive contracts. So he seems like he's weaponizing it in a good way for the good of the sport in general, which is cool that he's in a position to do that, obviously, between him organizing and promoting it and whoever the backer is.
Let's pick 8 guys, Calum.
Okay.
Before we do that, though, just an aside, if some of the 10 million prize pool is set aside for other matches, then we could see an event that has more than just this 8-man. We assume it will be 8 men, and that was kind of my point. 8-man bracket take place. So if they can find a way to create some women's matches, a women's tournament alongside a men's tournament, I don't know. I think there's more to this event than just 8 guys taking part. So before anyone suggests that like we're forgetting about women or women should be involved in this as well, yes, I agree. I'd like to see some female grappling on the show, but I just think like in terms of star power and potential excitement and the best division to make it around, it's going to be male 80 kilos. So let's just mention that now, though, before people think we're just brushing that aside. So let's pick 8 men, 80 kilo-ish, to take part in this tournament. Calum, who have you got and why? Give me one name off the bat. Who we're building this around? Who's the first guy you go to?
Okay, so this is my personal list, not based on necessarily who I think like deserves it the most. It's just purely who would entertain me the most and who's
number 1?
The most fascinating. So number 1 is Mika Gavao, one of the obvious ones.
Because
he's obviously defending ADCC champion, Gi world champion. He's obviously going to be one of the guys that you want in at that weight class. There's a lot of guys that we want to see him against in and around that weight. And, if you're having a tournament on the lighter side of things, you can't not have Mika Gavao in at the moment. Arguably the biggest name in the sport as far as active competitors. I would comfortably say he's got the biggest Brazilian fan base, and he's definitely got a large fan base in the rest of the world as well. So exciting as well, and big submission hunter. So we'll definitely see some good matches out of him.
Okay. Who's next?
Another obvious one, Kade Ruotolo. So I've only got one Ruotolo on this list, just for the sake of, like I said, for me, if you were to do this on fairness and who deserves it, you would have both of these guys in because they're both amazing. But for like sake of what fascinates me, I don't really need two guys that are literally identical twins that have got a very, very similar game. I would rather just have one or the other, and Kade has had more success in competition as of recent, so that's why I've chose to put him in there. So he's also ADCC champion, CJI 1 champion, super exciting guy to watch. Obviously, like Mika, if you're going to have a tournament around this weight, Kade or Ty needs to be in it. I've chosen to put Kade in, like I said, because he's had more competition success recently.
Is he a bit more focused on MMA, though, just now?
I mean, I think he is focused on both. I think both of them are, but I think he was focused on MMA even when CGI went on, CGI 1 went on. And he still chose to do that. And, you know, like, aside from the different challenge that MMA gives you, most jiu-jitsu guys choose to go to MMA for the money, but if someone's offering 10 million and you're making more than 99% of MMA fighters in MMA history, I'm sure Kade would be very happy and willing to jump on board with this.
Okay. Mika, Kade, number
Next
3.
one is going to be Andrew Tackett.
Now you've got to put him up for discussion, right? Like,
yeah.
Obviously, I was saying before, it's Craig's decision whether he makes the call. Does he want someone associated with UFC BJJ on the event? Does he want to not have those guys? Does he want to see what Andrew Tackett's contract status is? Does he want to see if UFC BJJ are willing to have him do it? Does he want to run the risk of a UFC BJJ guy coming in and winning this event if, you know, he's not seemingly the biggest fan of UFC BJJ? All those things have to be considered. But within our discussion, Calum, I think you're absolutely right to suggest that Andrew Tackett is one of the top 8 guys in this weight class. And not only that, when we're looking at star power, excitement of matches, style, etc., he should be in the running. But whether he will be remains to be seen. But what would be your reasons why you're picking up the phone and checking this out?
Yeah, so he kind of left off his non-UFC BJJ career and arguably the best jiu-jitsu match of all time against Kade. He's only looked as good, if not better, since then. So I think with all the rest of the guys I've got on this list, he's either going to give them an absolute scrap on the feet like he did with Kade, or he's going to give absolute, you know, hell to any of the good guard players. And like that's part of it with me is like the fascination of possible matchups. So to see him against a couple of these guys I've got on the list guard wise, his kind of passing relentlessness against their guards, and then also his relentlessness on the feet against some of the stand-up guys on this list, that have to have him in here.
It's interesting that the Tacketts were one of the first sign-ups to the first CJI, if memory serves me right. They were one of the big names that first jumped in, and then you thought, oh, this is interesting, because they could be in the ADCC. And now it looks like they might be on the other side of the fence when it comes to CJI 2.5, and things move quickly in grappling, don't they?
Yeah.
So Andrew Tackett, though, I think we're right to hope that he'll be involved, but I don't know if he will be. Number 4,
we're starting to get into the realm of up for debate whether there's guys that deserve it more, but like I say, I think all these guys would deserve to be in it, but I'm just saying you could argue for other people over them. But again, for me, it's about who I think would be entertaining and fascinating to see against all the other guys in this. So my number 4 is Joseph Chen. So achievement wise, again, you can easily argue other guys that should be above him, but I just think like his trajectory, his technicality, his influence on the game, really fascinated to see like his technical wrestling versus like the scrappy, fast-paced wrestling of someone like Andrew Tackett. Again, his guard versus some of the guard players I've got later on the list. just always like enjoying watching him from the point of view of studying his game, and it's just always entertaining good jiu-jitsu. So he is on my list at number 4.
And styles make matches, and I think Joseph can bring something different to the table compared to some of the other guys. You know, Joseph going up against a great guard player. We love to see Joseph's top play. Joseph's wrestling is evolving, his blending between the two. His style of passing is different to like a Ruotolo. So I think Joseph adds another interesting bit of spice to the mix. And also character-wise, I think he's good to have involved. I think all the guys we've mentioned thus far have a bit of something about them, but they're all very different characters. And I think that mix makes for an interesting combination.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would like to see in the lead up to this maybe a bit more marketing of that. Maybe you could have like a press conference with all the guys in the tournament, or like some individual embedded episodes. I feel like that would be really good in the lead up for things.
A press conference, for that, I think you need some press.
That's true.
I wonder where they could find.
They could fly us out, Ross.
Well, you know, I've been known to ask a question in my time. So, yeah, there you go. CJI, if you want some actual press in the room, not just fans, give us a call. Joseph Chen should definitely be in. I agree. Now, you were saying anyone who we mentioned past the first 3 a bit more up for debate. I think at number 5, if you're awaiting name, who I think you're awaiting name, I don't think there's any debate that they should be involved.
I agree. So number 5, I've got the guy who about 50% of people thought won CJI won, which is Levi Jones-Leary. So he had an amazing run the first CJI, and he had a super close match against Kade. I am one of those people that gave it to Levi with how I was scoring it by a hair. Like I say, I feel like from anecdotal experience of people I've spoken to, it does seem to be about 50% of people either way. So, you know, definitely deserves to be in this. He hasn't competed as much recently. I think he's had some injuries and stuff, but since switching over to no-gi and having that big ascent, he's definitely established himself as one of the best guys. But even if he hadn't had that achievement, I would arguably still have him on the list. Just again, when it comes to like fascination, like how is his guard going to hold up against Andrew Tackett? We've spoken about wanting to see that match, another rematch against Joseph Chen, all these guys. You know, he's such a specialist and expert in his area. I think seeing him versus some of the better guard passers on this list would be really fascinating to watch.
Okay. Now, based on your list, why don't we move the person who you wrote down 7th up 1 spot, and then we can leave the next 2 guys, because they might be away to have a match against each other very, very soon.
Yeah.
So tell me who you had as the 7th guy on your list, but we'll just move him up to the 6th spot now for the flow of the pod.
Yeah, so my second guard specialist on this list, Mateusz Jasinski. So I think from an achievement standpoint, again, like Mateusz hasn't like actually won that many big competitions, but you know, when it comes to things like just individual matches, what he's done on like the Polaris shows, his game, like from a fascination point of view and from a danger point of view, I'm fascinated to see him against a lot of the guys on this list. You know, it's him against Andrew Tackett. I think Mateusz is kind of like a slightly slicker, more dangerous version of Owen Flanagan in some ways. So like, could see a similar match between him as you saw against Andrew, but I think Mateusz's ability to really like cinch stuff up in a fraction of a second, could see him do better in that. You know, him against Joseph Chen again, would love to see. I think he's capable of catching guys like Mika and Kade. Especially if we see a round robin format, I would love to see him against a lot of these different guys. So, you know, him and Levi are definitely going to give you some fascinating matchups with some of the better guard players.
Mateusz could absolutely wreck a tournament. Just in terms of if it's round robin, his ability to win quick, his ability to take out absolutely anyone, including favourites. The risk in terms of his attacks, I'm not saying he goes out to injure people, but just the risk in terms of his attacks of someone getting injured as a result of what he's going for. Yeah, he'd be a huge problem in a tournament setting. Perhaps his first big win is going to be ADCC this summer, because he is in as a invitee, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's going to be on home turf in Poland. I think that's going to be an amazing atmosphere, with people backing McTavish and other Polish people who I know are competing at it. So you'll have Paweł Jaworski and Adam Wojcinski for two off the top of my head. I think that's going to be awesome. But yeah, he should definitely be in. I think if this 2.5 is taking part in July, it also frees up some of the guys who are doing ADCC to take part. They've got plenty of time to recover until, what's ADCC, like the very start of September, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's no reason why they couldn't be involved and do both. Okay, so next two athletes, there's a under 155 tournament taking place at Who's Number One. I think it's on Tuesday night, US time. We've got on one side of the bracket Dorian Olivares against Julian Espinoza, and then on the other side of the bracket, Max Hansen against DeAndre Corby. And we were chatting before hitting record, and we think it's going to be Dorian against DeAndre in the final, and we were chatting about who we think might win that. So, Calum, why don't you give your reasons why you would invite both DeAndre and Dorian to CJI 2.5 if it was you that was doing the booking, and then give us some insight into how you think a match between the two might go.
Yeah, so Dorian, especially since CGI 2 is way up there as far as like fascinated to see how we would get on against certain guys, despite him being, you know, even with DeAndre walks around at 77 and represented the 77 spot for his team at CGI 2. So like Dorian's probably the smallest guy I've got on this list, but you could argue that he's the most physically dominant, which is like ridiculous considering that he's the smallest guy in the weight class. So I just find, you know, his build, he's like 5'4", just built like a little pit bull, packed muscle, ridiculous cardio, ridiculous explosiveness, ridiculous toughness, you know, relentless wrestling, relentless guard passing. The size of his limbs, even guys like McTavish and Levi, like if they get a hold of an arm, like it doesn't take much for him to like pull his little arm out of there. I just think seeing him against some of these guys would be really, really interesting to watch, despite being a lot smaller. Like I said, physically, he's like one of the most elite guys in the sport across the board. I think like how professionally he takes his athleticism, especially when you compare it to other sports and how important people take that. Like he is like right up there, especially with his age as well, which is like just doubly impressive. And then yeah, amazing wrestler. Could argue he's technically up there with all the wrestlers on this list, and then amazing guard passing style as well. So I would be really, really interested to see him against a lot of the guys on this list, especially given the fact of like how good he was against some of the heavier guys in CGI 2.
Why have you got DeAndre in?
DeAndre, I have got in. I love his style as well. He is super well rounded, and then he's obviously representing a very popular approach to the game in general, the ecological approach. So interested from that perspective. I think his game is super well rounded. He is very good standing, very good guard, very good passing. I'm interested to see him against like some of the guard players like Levi and McTavish, and just his approach to focusing on like smaller intentions, because that seemed to really work well against him, against Pato. I think it was Zapatero they had a match. He said afterwards, yeah, it was just focused on keeping my legs at the inside position, and he was able to stay safe against one of the best leg lockers in the world. So really interesting to see, you know, how someone like that can deal with a super dangerous game like McTavish or Levi if he just has this like one intention. Like let's just say I'm going to keep the feet off of me and I'm going to pressure the knees. Like these kind of simple things that he really focuses on and just gets ridiculously good at because he spends so much time focusing on those things. I think that approach to the game, as well as what we've seen of him in the last few years, he deserves to be on the list, and I'd be really interested to see him against all the guys on this list.
And if Dorian and DeAndre do indeed meet in the final at who's number one, who do you think wins that match between them?
Yeah, it's interesting. They both lost first round, the last ADCC, but they both seem to have come on leaps and bounds since then. I'd probably give a slight edge to Dorian. I think when you hear Danaher and some of his guys speak about stylistic things, one thing they mention is like a creation of movement game versus a negation of movement game. So that is definitely a big thing that we're going to see in this match, with DeAndre trying to like slow things down, stop the other person moving, and then Dorian is obviously one of the most movement-based guys that we have in the sport at the moment. Both guys are actually very, very physically dominant. Like I've seen DeAndre lift in the gym. He's got some very impressive numbers on his lifts, and he's obviously built like a tank at that height as well. But I just think, there's more physical qualities that matter in sport and jiu-jitsu than just raw strength, which I think DeAndre's got in spades, maybe even more than Dorian. But I think Dorian's cardio and ability to generate power gives him the edge. Obviously, just speaking about physical things at the moment, but I think like these guys are two of the most physical guys in jiu-jitsu, so it's worth mentioning that. From a stylistic point of view, I think as a whole, DeAndre has more skill and in more areas, but Dorian is just so good and so dominant at what he does, and his game really leads itself into being able to enforce on other people and not get taken out of it. So that's why I would give a slight, maybe like 55 to 60% edge to Dorian, but I definitely think it can go either way.
Okay, that is our 8. Let us know in the comments who you think should be in that we haven't picked. Do you agree with us, or do you think there are any other contenders that should be in the mix? Do you disagree with our suggestion that the tournament should take place at around about 80 kilos, or would you like to see it at another weight? Yeah, let us know, and we'll do plenty more podcasts in the build-up to this event. The hype for the event has started now, so get on board. It only makes it better when it actually takes place because you're more invested in it. So I'd say jump on board now. We certainly have, and we're going to try and keep you up to date with all the news and the rumors that we hear, but we're also really keen to hear what people out there want. And then just lastly, on the pod, it's not all about no-gi jiu-jitsu. We love gi jiu-jitsu here at the Oracle as well, and I spent a lot of time on Sunday watching the Pans, and I thought it was an awesome event. Loads of exciting matches, so don't listen to people who say gi isn't exciting. And I could talk loads more about it, but to be fair, most of you guys that tune into the Oracle seem to be more interested in no-gi jiu-jitsu based on the figures that we get for the episodes that we put out. But I do think it has to be noted that Sarah Galvao in the final of the women's open class as a lightweight beat multi-time world champion super heavyweight Gabi Pisagna in an amazing conclusion to their match. And if you've not seen it, get on Instagram at the very least and check it out. Or if you've got Flow Grappling, go and see it. But very impressive that someone who is conceding so much weight was able to beat the super heavyweight to win the match. But not only that, someone as credentialed as Gabi, who has double golded at so many majors. So yeah, shout out Sarah Galvao. I just wanted to put that on the end of the podcast because the Oracle is watching gi jiu-jitsu as well and is watching women's gi jiu-jitsu. But I think where people want coverage is what people are really excited about. What they get more invested in is no gi jiu-jitsu. So that's why our podcast's mainly on this CJI event that seems to be on the horizon. But we'll be back soon with more coverage of jiu-jitsu. But for now, get into the comments. Let us know what you think about our picks for CJI 2.5.